Bang, exploding the myth. We look up in the heavens today and we see amazing sights that people didn't see until Galileo turned the telescope to the heavens. We have nebulas and galaxies of all different sizes and shapes and colors. And it's just amazing what we see out there. And then when we get closer to home, we have amazing planets like Saturn and Jupiter, and the jewel of the whole universe is where we live, Earth. How did all those things come into existence? Well, the dominant view today in the world is the theory of evolution. And you might say, well, now, wait a minute, I thought evolution was about Darwin and how we got plants and animals. Well, it is about that. But evolution is really a three-part theory to explain all of reality. And so I like to explain it this way. We have biological evolution, which explains how the first living cell came into existence, and then how that cell, over millions of years, diversified into all the different plants and animals. But then you have geological evolution, which explains how the Earth came into existence, from a hot molten ball slowly cooling and developing a crust and evolving an atmosphere, and eventually those rock layers with all those fossils formed. And then you have cosmological evolution, which explains how stars and galaxies and planets and solar systems came into existence. You say, well, I've never heard of cosmological evolution or geological evolution. Well, that's maybe because you haven't heard me give this talk, but actually, the evolutionists do use that kind of language. Here are the covers of 4 astronomy textbooks, and they're all talking about the evolution of stars and galaxies. And I could show you geology textbooks that talk about the evolution of the Earth. Here's a chart used in an online course at Harvard University about cosmic evolution from Big Bang to mankind. So the whole story is evolution. And that story about origins is based on a worldview that controls science today. It is the worldview that philosophers call naturalism, but it's also known by the name atheism. And there are 2 assumptions controlling science today. The first assumption is that nature or matter is all that exists. Now, not every scientist believes that. There are scientists who believe in God. But most scientists do their scientific work as if that's true. So they might believe in God on Sunday or Saturday, whenever they're going to their religious services, but when they do their science, they do it as if nature is all that exists. And the second assumption controlling science today is that everything can and indeed must be explained by 3 things: time and chance and the laws of nature working on matter. If you have those 3 things, time, enough of it, millions and billions of years, chance, and the laws of nature, the laws of physics and chemistry, you can explain the origin of stars and galaxies, the origin of the solar system, the origin of the Earth, the origin of plants and animals, the origin of man, the origin of language, the origin of religion. You just need enough time, chance, and the laws of nature. Well, because of those assumptions, the dominant view today regarding cosmic origins is the Big Bang theory. And when the theory was originally proposed in the early 20th century, they talked about this really, really compact bit of matter, energy, space, which some affectionately called the cosmic egg, that developed some kind of instability, and it started to expand, and space expanded with it. That was the Big Bang. Today they don't talk about the cosmic egg because, of course, that raised an important question. Well, where did the cosmic egg come from? And a lot of astronomers and astrophysicists didn't like that question. So now they say, well, nothing expanded into something. And that happened about 13.7 billion years ago. And after a few 100 million billion years, helium and hydrogen gas clouds began to form, and they then developed centers of gravity, and that collapsed and ignited nuclear reactions, which caused the first stars to be born 10 to 12 billion years ago. And then some of those stars exploded in supernovas, and that caused shock waves in the nearby universe that caused other gas clouds to collapse to form new stars. And our sun was born about 5 billion years ago, and the solar system came from the sun. So that's the evolutionary view for the origin of the cosmos, based on naturalistic assumptions. But not all scientists accept those assumptions. There are scientists who have a biblical worldview, not a naturalistic, atheistic worldview. And there are two basic assumptions in the biblical worldview. The first is that the eternal, good, all-knowing, all-powerful, holy God exists, and he created everything else. Now that's a very different starting assumption than nature is all that exists. And the second assumption flows out of this one because this God is not silent. He's a speaking God. And he has spoken through one book, the Bible. And the Bible is God's completely truthful eyewitness testimony that explains the key events in history so that we can correctly interpret the evidence from the origin and history of the creation. And so we want to look at what the world actually reveals to us and look at what are the results and how the assumptions of those two different worldviews fit with what we actually observe. But before we do that, we need to just clarify an important word, and that's the word science. You've maybe heard this. Evolution is science and creation is faith. Or evolution is science and creation is religion. Ever heard anything like that? The evolutionists love to say that, but whenever I hear that, I know that that person either doesn't really understand science and the nature of this origins debate, or he's trying to confuse us. Because to understand this origins debate, we need to understand that there are two broad categories of science. I like to call them operation science and origin science. Operation science is what we normally think of when we think of science. It's also called experimental science or observational science. And it's the science that produces technology, finds cures for disease. It's the science that put a cell phone in everybody's pocket. And so most of biology, chemistry, physics, meteorology, what they do on the evening news, weather report, engineering, medical research, those are all forms of operation, experimental, observational science. We're studying things in the present to see how they operate, how they function, whether it's cancer cells or weather patterns, and we're trying to figure out how to predict things, how to manipulate things, how to produce new technology. But that kind of science won't answer the question, how did Saturn come into existence? Because you can't recreate Saturn in the laboratory. It's there, and you want to know what happened in the unobserved past to produce that planet, to produce those rings. That's a historical question. And so for historical questions, we need what I call origin science. And that's also sometimes called historical science. And historical geology, trying to figure out the history of the earth. Paleontology, studying fossils. Paleoanthropology, studying human fossils. Paleoclimatology, trying to figure out what was the climate like 1 million years ago. Archaeology, cosmology, and forensic science. That's what police detectives do, trying to solve the question, why is that dead body in the living room? That's a historical question. These are forms of historical science. And I can illustrate the difference between the two if I think about it with a car. A car mechanic is an operation scientist. He knows how the car operates. He knows how the pistons go up and down. He knows how the air conditioner works. And if it doesn't work, he knows how to fix it. But just because he knows how the car operates doesn't mean he knows anything about how the car came into existence. The way the pistons operate doesn't tell you how the pistons came into existence. The way the air conditioner works doesn't tell you how the air conditioner came into existence. That's a question of origins. And so the car manufacturer is the origin scientist. He knows how the car operates, but he knows how every part of that car came into existence. The question of origins is a different question than the question of operation. We know how things operate, some things about what some things operate in our universe. We know how some things go around other things, some in very elliptical orbits, some in pretty close to circular orbits, and things rotate on their axis. So we know things about how
Thanks
they
for
operate.
watching.
But the question is, what do people know about origins?